All right, good afternoon, everybody. Evening. Go ahead and put my phone on Do Not Disturb here. We will get started. So if you have your questions, go ahead and post them. It's going to be below the video. If you're on a smaller screen like a mobile device, if you're on a larger screen like a laptop or desktop, it's going to be to the right of the video. Now I've got someone trying to call me. So anyway, it's going to be to the right of the video if you're on a larger screen. So I start with questions that were asked up to an hour before. So guessing I got to refresh this because guessing we got some questions in there. There we go. So if you happen to ask your question more than an hour ago and you want to get your question answered, no worries. All you have to do is copy and paste your question in there. The reason why I do this, I want to answer questions for people who I think are here waiting to see their question get answered. So if I scroll down here, looks like we got Jeannie M. So Jeannie M says, since I have not utilized the masterclass on Facebook and I wanted to go through most of it myself, I was wondering when I could go through the material. Will I be able to ask you for any one of the staff members ask as they come up? Will the masterclass be available to me after Facebook ends? So for looks like he's got some questions about Facebook, about the ball striking masterclass. So basically, if you're not familiar with what the ball striking masterclass is, it's a program that we have. It's a 90-day program. It's not included with the membership, but we do offer enrollment into it every month or two, depending on the season. This time of year, we're going to be offering it more often, probably about every month, every 4 to 6 weeks, I would imagine. We're probably going to be offering it. But in the wintertime, there's not as much of a demand for it, so we don't offer it as much. So in the wintertime, it might be every 2 to 3 months. But in general, every month or two, you're going to have an opportunity to sign up for the ball striking masterclass. Now, included with that ball striking masterclass is access to the Facebook, a private Facebook group where you can ask questions and get and post videos of your swing and get feedback from myself. Usually, is who's going to give you the feedback. So that's a big part of it as well. Now, the videos for the ball striking masterclass you get access to those videos week by week as you go through the program. So week 1, you're going to get access to week 1, but you don't have access to all the videos. Then week 2, you get access to week 1 and 2, and then so on and so forth. And then after you get access to all the videos, if you've gone through the whole program, you'll have access to all the videos as long as you stay an all access member. So even after the program is over, as long as you remain an all access member at Top Speed Golf, you will have access to those videos. Now, the Facebook group is the only thing that does expire. You get 4 months. So the program itself is 3 months, but we give you 4 months in the Facebook group because, some people, maybe they get a little injury that happens, tweak your back, or maybe you go on a vacation, maybe you just want to take a little bit of time off, whatever it may be. We have that extra month in there to give you that. So that's a cool thing about it, but that's the only thing that expires. I wish we could keep people in the Facebook group forever, but then we would just have way too many people in there and we wouldn't have enough instructors to keep up with everything. So we have to kind of filter people out as they go through the 4 months. Now, you can go through the ball striking masterclass without the Facebook group. That's completely fine. There's been a lot of people that have done it and been successful, but the people who have the most success are the people that are using the Facebook group, that are more engaged with the program, posting videos of their swing and getting feedback and working on things like that. So that's what I would recommend to do, but you do not have to use Facebook. It's an optional thing. The price is the same. So if you use Facebook or not, that's completely up to you. The price doesn't change. But as far as asking questions go, you can ask your questions just like you do anything else. You can come on here during office hours and ask questions, but that will be the only way that you'll be able to get your questions answered if you do the ball striking masterclass. It'll only be through here. Otherwise, you have to do it through the Facebook group. Now, the Facebook group, you can post a question on there at one day, and then the next day you're going to get an answer. So you don't have to be on there at a certain time. Whereas with the office hours, you got to be on here at a certain time to get your question answered. Otherwise, it's not going to get answered. So there's that convenient factor. You're going to get an instant answer if you're on here, if you're on the right time. But if you got a question at 8 o'clock in the morning, you can post it on the Facebook group and get an answer sometime in the next 24 hours, typically is what the response time is on the Facebook group. So you can just post your question anytime it pops into your head and ask it. So I'd recommend using the Facebook group. You don't have to, but that would be my recommendation. People generally, from what I've seen, have the best results if they're utilizing the Facebook group. All right, so let's keep going here. So Louis V says, what drill or tip would you recommend to daily keep my swing as close to what it should be? Plain, simple tip to work on daily. So basically what I would work on is there's basically 4 things that matter in the golf swing to hit a good golf shot. 1, you got to make ball first contact. 2, you have to hit the ball in the center of the face. 3, you have to have the face angle pretty square, impact pretty close to square. And 4 would be working on your club path. So your club path is the in to out or out to in movement of the club. So as long as those 4 things are good, you're going to hit a good golf shot. So what I'd recommend doing is doing daily drills where you're focusing on those things. A great tool would be something like this AccuStrike mat, or a divot board would be good, because this gives you feedback on most of those things. So for example, I'm going to hit one. I'm going to try to chunk one off the toe and swing over the top. So over the top, chunk off the toe. And let's see what I can get it to look like here. So I probably didn't chunk that one very much, but a little bit off the toe. But you can see my path, because of this felt on here, and the divot board is the same way. You can see that it's clearly an out to in path. I'm swinging in that direction. Now I didn't chunk it, but I swung over the top a little bit, and I'm a little bit toward the toe. If you're looking, my club's going that way, I'm a little bit on the toe. So there's a little dot right here. I don't know if you can see it. That's the only downside about the AccuStrike mat that I'm not a huge fan of, is that they do have this little paint on here. And I've probably hit, I don't know, probably 1,000 balls on here. And the little paint just gets to where it's wearing off. It's a little bit tough to see where you get, but that could be fixable. I mean, you can maybe put some paint on there and see if that does the trick. But that's my only knock. Whereas the divot board, it doesn't. That just has the sequence that goes back and forth. I think it's a little bit easier to see the divots on this one. The divot board's it's clear where the divot starts, but the direction of it can be a little bit unclear at times. But for the most part, a device like this, so practicing hitting the ground, in front of, right? And then I have this the wrong way. Practicing hitting the ground in front of the divot, right? Practicing hitting the ground behind the divot, and then practicing hitting ground right at the divot. That can be a great tool for you to get things working a little bit better. Practice hitting the ground, hitting it where you're off the toe intentionally, then practice it where you're hitting it off the heel intentionally, and then practice where you're hitting it right in the center of the face, right? So I don't know if you can really see that very well, but it's giving me feedback on all those things. Now I can practice my path, right? I can practice swinging in to out, swinging out to in, and then swinging right on plane. So you can see in to out, out to in, and so on and so forth. So if you can practice those things and always have a sense where the middle is, then you're always going to be in good shape with it, right? It's never going to get too far off. So that would be my recommendation, is get something like a divot board, make swings on it every day where you're making your ground contact. You're practicing different levels of your ground contact. So intentionally hitting shots that are chunks, intentionally hitting thin shots, intentionally hitting shots where you're flushing them. And you might ask, why would I intentionally hit a chunk shot? Well, it's to gain a better control and awareness of what you're doing, right? So you may go out there someday and hit some balls and you're a little bit off, right? You're thinning everything. Well, you can rely on that feeling where you were chunking it, right? And try to hit the ball doing that, and you'll actually hit the ball flush, right? So you get a better overall sense of feeling awareness if you do that. So that's what I would recommend doing, getting something like that. If you go, let me see if we can search. See if I can put a link. I'm not sure if we have a place where you can just go on the website. Yeah, so let's do this. So I'm going to put a link to, because we made a YouTube video on the divot board, and I'll put a link to that video, and then you all can go watch it. And then if you click the link below the video, you can, so I'll put this, a link to this up here. I'll put it in the comments, and then y'all can go check it out and see a little bit more about what the divot board's all about. That's the AccuStrike mat. If you go to, if you just do a Google search for AccuStrike, you should be able to find where you can purchase one of those. But I prefer the divot board. I just think it's a little bit better tool, a little bit higher quality. I think it'll take a little bit more. It'll last a little bit longer. That would be my recommendation. If you follow that link that I put in the comments there, you can go check it out. All right, so Eric B says, pretty new to TSG system, but really like it so far. My question, should you work through each section at a time or combine multiple, like 20-minute distance fix, stable fluid spine? It really depends on how much time you have to practice, right? So I recommend doing the 20-minute distance fix. That would probably be your number one priority. The reason being is that it's the fastest, and it's one of the best and fastest way to add improvement to your game. So what that means is, distance is a huge part of playing well. So if we can add 30 yards and get you, to where you're hitting it 30 yards further, which is basically like the average of the people who go through the course, then, that's just going to make golf so much easier for you. If you hit longer drives, you have shorter approaches, you have closer proximity to the hole, and you have shorter putts or your shorter chips. Much easier chance of getting close. If you sat there and you hit 10 5-irons from, let's say, 180 yards, and then you hit 10 8-irons from 150 yards, well, you're probably going to hit those 8-irons on average are going to be much closer to the hole. So that's what the 20-minute distance fix does for you. It gives you that extra distance, and it doesn't take a lot of time and effort to do it. It's a 3-week program, and it's the fastest and one of the most effective ways to improve your game. So that's why I recommend doing that for sure. And that's why when you sign up, that's what we recommend you do right off the bat. Now, if you have more time to practice, the 20-minute distance fix is going to be roughly about 3 hours a week between the videos and going out and doing the drills. You're looking at about three hours a week, I would say, 2 maybe. And depending on, what your setup is, if you got to drive to a driving range and things like that, that can add up too. So I would say roughly about 2 or 3 hours a week. Now, if you have 4 or 5 hours to practice a week, yeah, sure, do your 20-minute distance fix and then work on some stable fluid spine. If you have 5, 6, 7 hours to practice, work on the top speed golf wedge system or the putting system or anything like that. So it really just depends on how much time you have to practice. If you have 2 or 3 hours of practice a week, then, which I think that's kind of the category that most people are going to be in, then I would just recommend sticking to that 20-minute distance fix and then working through one piece at a time in the top speed golf system. All right, so let's keep moving through here. So John C says, what usually causes a popped up drive? Typically, a popped up drive is going to come from the low point of your swing occurring at the golf ball. So when we're hitting the driver, the ball is teed up, right? So we got the ball, it's teed up. And when we look at the better players, typically their club is going to come in, it's going to bottom out before the golf ball, and then it's going to work up into the golf ball. That's why we tee it up, to give yourself space to have the club to work up into the golf ball. So if you're popping the ball up, generally, it's not always the case, but this is the most common, what's usually the cause, is this club is coming down and it's reaching that low point where it bottoms out right where the golf ball is. And then that's going to cause that high crown on the face. So you're most likely it's an over the top. When you swing over the top, that moves the low point of your swing more toward the target. So if you imagine here, if I go extreme over the top, right? Extreme, I'm swinging 45 degrees over the top. I'm swinging basically toward third base. Well, that's going to move the low point of my swing toward the target, which may move it right underneath the golf ball and cause that pop-up. Whereas if I swing toward first base, I swing 45 degrees into out, right? If I do that, then my low point is going to be much further back. So I'd look at your swing on video and see if you're coming over the top or not. That's usually coming over the top, getting that low point too far forward, that's where the pop-up comes from. So you want to feel like you're staying behind the ball and you're swinging more into out, and almost like I actually have a golf ball here that has a nail in it. So I have this ball that has a nail in it, almost like this ball is sitting up on a tee. Let's put this ball here. You got the ball sitting up on a tee here, and that nail is angled up. And you're trying to drive that nail up into the golf ball. So in order to do that, you would need to have the club bottoming out and then working up into the golf ball. So I would try that. I would imagine the club almost touching the ground, a foot before the golf ball, and then working up into the golf ball. Imagine that club kind of brushing the grass before the ball and then working up into the ball, driving that nail up in there. And that should help get rid of those pop-ups. But I look at your swing on video and see if you're coming over the top. Get that club to swing more from the inside, and that should help out quite a bit. So DB says, I have a tendency to come up prematurely at impact. How can that be avoided? I've improved the lag and move in the downswing, but occasionally come up early, which pulls everything left unless I don't release properly. Then it fades high into the right help. So it's hard to say without seeing your swing. There's just so many things that could be going on there. But there's a couple places I would look. One, we actually have a stop early extension section. So I would be looking there through some of the drills there. You've mentioned that you've improved lag and the move, but if we've just improved it, that's one thing. But if we're actually doing it, that's completely something else. So I'm not sure if you mean that you were casting before and now you're casting less, or if you're actually getting some lag. Because if you're releasing the club early and casting, you're going to have to stand up to make room for the club, right? Because you're releasing that club right away. So that could be part of what's going on. So you may need to continue to improve your lag to get that better. So that way you can release the club out in front and not have to stand up through it to make room for it. The move could be another one. If you're coming down steep, which is the opposite of the move, right? So like I said, I'm not sure if you mean you've improved it. Maybe you're coming down really steep and now you're just less steep, right? That's improved, but that's not necessarily doing the move. So if you have this club steep at all, you're going to generally need to stand up to get the club to work on plane, because otherwise you're just going to come over the top, right? So you may need to continue to work through the move. You may need to work on the straight line release course. You mentioned that some stuff about the release there. So you need to get that club releasing out in front, because if you release it early, you have to stand up to make room for the club, right? And then we also have some drills in the never or stop early extension course that can help you as well. One of them is posture at address. A lot of times, if you are very hunched over, you're very bent over like this, you're going to tend to stand up in your backswing and then continue to stand up in the downswing, and that could be a cause of it. So unfortunately, I wish there was something I could tell you, yep, this is going to fix your problem. But unfortunately, there's just so many things going on that can make that happen. And there's just no way for me to know without seeing your swing. Now, if you'd like me to look at your swing, I do offer an unlimited swing review program. This is where you can send videos to me of your swing, and you can, and I can see exactly what's going on, and I can give you a personalized lesson on exactly what you need to do specifically to get rid of it. Now, yesterday I did have one spot available. Let me double check. See if I still have that spot, or if I don't, it's possible I may. Yeah, so I actually have 2 spots available right now. So if anybody, this is not very often that I have even one, especially 2 spots available. So if anybody would like to work with me, like I said, these office hours, they're great to get your questions answered, but with specific things that are happening in your swing, I always feel bad, because unless it's something that I know for sure what the problem is, but if it's a movement pattern, there's just, everybody's different, and you may be reacting to something, something else that's making that happen. There's just so many things. Someone's hitting a slice. I mean, I know you need to swing more from the inside, but there could be things that you're specifically doing that are making it difficult for you to do that. And there's just no way for me to know what that is without seeing your swing. So if you'd like me to look at your swing, I'd highly recommend signing up for the Unlimited Swing Review program. And you can send videos of your swing, just use an app. You can send as many videos in as you want during the month, and you keep going month to month to month, and keep working out things. So that's what I'd recommend doing. If you'd like to sign up for Unlimited Swing Reviews, click the get a review link at the top of the page there. That will take you to the Swing Review page. If you scroll down there, you should see, hopefully, you can make it there in time before somebody snags them. But grab one of those spots. If you don't see a spot available, just join my waiting list. I try to open up that waiting list, open up spots to the waiting list every month or two. Just depends on how many people filter in and out of the swing reviews. But yeah, that's what I would recommend doing. But beyond that, I would look at those courses. I'd look at maybe improving your lag some more, getting the move to where you're really doing it. Looking at that stop early extension course, working through some of the drills in there. A lot of these things are just, basically the entire top speed golf system is a way to make you stay in your posture and release the club properly. It just kind of goes through everything. Not one specific thing, but several things that could be going on in the swing. So that's what I would continue to do if I was you, if you didn't want to do the swing reviews. Drew B says, when working on the move, is it okay to pronate your wrist earlier, say on the takeaway, rather than at the same time you are shallowing the swing at the top? So basically what he's talking about is forearm rotation. Is it okay? Essentially what he's asking is it okay to shallow the club in the backswing? And yes, it is, as long as you're shallowing it in the downswing as well. That's where a lot of people get into trouble. They try to shallow the club in the backswing, and then what ends up happening is they steepen it in the downswing. So basically, they'll get it up here like this. It's shallow at the top. And then in the downswing, they steepen it. So we don't want to be doing that. Now, you can be successful doing that as long as you are not steepening it so much that you're steep, right? So Ricky Fowler is a good example of someone who steepens the club, shallows the club in the backswing, and then steepens it a little bit in the downswing, but not so much that it's steep. Right. So he kind of gets up here like this. This is Ricky Fowler at the top. And then when he comes down, he's like this. But the club is shallow. The club is going from a shallower position to a steeper position, but he's still shallow. This butt end of the club is still pointing outside the golf ball. When I see most people do it, and this is just a common mistake that I see with people who try to work on shallowing, is that they'll shallow it in the backswing. And as soon as they start the downswing, the club gets like that and it gets steep. And that's where you're going to run into issues. So yes, you can absolutely do that, but you have to keep it that way. So if you get it up here and you have it shallow, you either have to basically keep it shallow, or you can steepen it, but not so much that it gets too steep, right? If we steepen it, it has to be kind of like Ricky. You have to have it really super shallow. Here's Ricky at the top, crazy shallow, and then he steepens it a little bit and it's shallow. If you get it up here like this and it's shallow, you have to keep it that way in the start of the downswing. Another person that does that would be a John Rahm. John Rahm has it pretty laid off there at the top, and then kind of keeps it shallow in the start of the downswing. If you look at someone like a Daniel Berger, right? Daniel Berger, very, very shallow, and then he kind of keeps it shallow when he's coming down. So you can do it. You just have to keep it shallow in downswing. The most important place where it's shallow is from the top of the swing to here. This is basically the most important place that it's shallow. When the lead arm is parallel to the ground, we want to have that club shallow, or moving to a shallower position. If we're here and then we're moving to a steeper position, we're going to have to shallow it out later, right? And that's going to lead to some issues. Now, you can be successful doing that. There are some players that do that. Phil Mickelson being one. Phil Mickelson steepens the club. Is a little bit steep and then shallows it late. But, Phil Mickelson has some of the best hands ever, right? Hands and timing ever. And, you may not be blessed with that kind of ability. So generally, it's better for most people. What I found, it's much easier and usually better to have that club steeper in the backswing and then shallower in the start of the downswing. The reason is that when you're steeper in the backswing, usually the forces that are being applied into this club, the motion of the club is going to be in your favor to help you to shallow it. So if you think about an extreme example of this, would be someone like a Matt Wolff, right? So Matt Wolff, he brings this club super steep. He brings this club way, way out here, and then the club is going this way as he's going up to the top. So when he starts down, that club's already got momentum that's shallowing out the club, and he just turns like crazy when he does that. So I'm not saying you got to go out and do a crazy kind of swing. That's kind of a unique thing that he does. He really gets that club looping around, but that's generally a smaller version of that, where you're kind of bringing this club, what you see like a Tiger Woods do or an Adam Scott, where they kind of bring the club up a little bit steep, and then it's a little bit shallow on the downswing. So you're not going crazy steep and you're not going crazy shallow. It's just a little bit steep and then a little bit shallow in the start of the downswing. So that's generally going to be the better, because there's not a lot of crazy excess movement going on. But generally, shallow backswing leads to steep downswing. But everybody's a little bit different, so you got to try and work what's best for you. But as long as that club is working into that good position, that lead arm parallel, shallow position at this point in the swing, and it's not moving to steeper from there, then you're in good shape with it. So Paul B says, related to Robert M's earlier question, Robert M. So I don't think that we answered Robert M's question, because it looks like it was posted on Sunday. But let's see. If you have a strong grip to help the draw, do you still flatten out the wrist so at impact the club face is square? It depends. So the more, let's just answer Robert M's question real quick, because I think it has a lot to do with your question. I didn't read your question, but basically, the stronger your grip is, the less you have to kind of flatten it or bow it as you come into impact. Now, typically, it is still going to be flat, because if you look here, let me grab this other club so it's a little shorter. So let's say I have a really strong grip, and for those of you who aren't familiar with what a strong grip is, that's where I'm taking my hand. I'm putting my thumb more on the side of the grip. So this would be a strong position, and this would be a weak position where my thumb is on top. So if my thumb is on top, I have to do, in order to have my hands ahead of the golf ball at impact and to have a square club face, I have to have that lead wrist kind of in a bowed position. So you can see how my wrist is in a bowed position there at impact. So just to bring up Matt Wolff again, Matt Wolff has a very weak grip. If you look at him at impact, his lead wrist is very bowed, and the trail wrist is very much in an extended back position. So generally, this is a pretty tough position for a lot of people to be in, because of how bowed that lead wrist has to be at impact, and how mainly it's a trail wrist, how extended back that has to be. Now, if you have a stronger grip, right, now my thumbs, let's say I have an extreme strong grip, right? I'm like a Paul using here, really, really crazy strong grip, where my thumb is more on the side of the grip there. And now I have my trail hand on here, and I go to impact, square club face, right, and my hands are in front. Well, look, my lead wrist is not near as extended back, right? Or my trail wrist, excuse me, is not near as extended back. And then my lead wrist, actually, it appears to be like it has some cup in it. Now, if you look at it from this angle, you're going to see that my lead wrist is maybe has a slight bow in it, but it's not, it's fairly flat. So in general, at impact, you need to have a flat to bowed wrist. The stronger your grip is, the more flat you can be. And the weaker your grip is, the more bow that you have to have in it. So let's go. And so that was Robert M's question. Let's go to Paul B's. So is there a trade-off between bowing, trying to learn the move, I'm struggling with consistency, and bowing my wrist to square the club face? Would I be losing anything by going to a stronger grip, but not bowing much, if at all, if there is a reasonable trade-off there? So basically, you have to find the right mix that works for you. If you have a very weak grip, it's going to be very, very difficult, or if you have a very weak grip and you have a difficulty bowing the wrist, you're going to have a difficulty getting shaft lean, because you're not going to be able to square the club face. Because if you imagine this, if I have a very weak grip and I'm used to coming in and not having any shaft lean, maybe just a tiny bit of shaft lean here, where you can see my lead wrist has quite a bit of cupping in it, right? It's cupped like that. Well, if I have that same wrist angle and now I push my hands forward, I have my hands more forward, that leaves the club face wide open. So in order to square that up, I have to bow my wrist like this to get that club face squared up. So if you're really struggling with bowing the wrist, I would recommend using more of a stronger grip, and you're still going to need to be in more of a flat position with that wrist. You're still not going to be able to cut. If you want shaft lean, you need to have a flat wrist, a flat-ish to slightly bowed wrist if you are using a very strong grip, or you need to have a weak grip and a very bowed wrist at impact. It's one or the other. You can't, in order to have shaft lean, you cannot have a very cupped wrist at impact, because that just opens the club face. So, and if you already have your hands in front, that's already opening the club face. So you need to have something to square that up a little bit. So stronger grip, you have to do it a little bit less. So I feel like you have your hands very forward, and I also feel like you're bowing your wrist. So hands forward as much as possible, body opening as much as possible, hands as low as possible, and bowing as much as possible, even if you have that strong grip, because the more you can close it by bowing, the more shaft lean you can get and hit it straight. I just try to exaggerate those things as much as you can. And I would try to do it in chip shots. Get it in chip shots first. Try it in a full swing, but then, if you can't get it in a full swing, full speed, you have to regress it somehow. So I regress it to where you can do it. Maybe try it at 50% speed. And if you can't do it there, then I'll try it like a 3/4 swing, 50% speed. If you can't get it there, then I do like a chip shot at full speed. See if you can do it there. If you can't do it there, then I do it at half swing. So the key to really improving is regressing it down to a point to where you can actually do what you're trying to do. And then from there, progress it. And then every time you go practice it, hopefully you can regress it a little less and then progress it a little bit more. Regress it a little bit less, then progress it a little more. So what that would look like, let's say right now, Paul, you're working on getting shaft lean and squaring up that face and bowing the wrist and things like that. Well, you do it in a full speed, full swing, can't do it. You tried it 10 times. You're trying as hard as and you got to make sure that you give it your full. It can't just be, I tried it doesn't work. You got to try it with all your might to get it done. So that's what I would try to do. And then if that doesn't work, then I was like, well, let's go to about 50% speed, because speed takes away feel. So when you go too fast, it takes away a little bit of your ability to control your movements. So if you go a little bit slower, it may make it easier to control your movement. So again, I would try to go at like 50% speed. If you're hitting an 8-iron and you normally hit your 8-iron 150 yards, I would literally try to hit your 8-iron 75 yards. That's the kind of speed that you'd want to use. Hit your 8-iron 75 yards trying to perform the movement. And if you can do it then I would try to progress it again. But if you can't, then I would go down to a shorter swing and see if you can do it in a shorter swing. So regress it to where you can do it, because you have to start somewhere. You can't keep doing the same wrong thing over and over and over and over and expect it to change. It's just not going to happen. You have to regress it to a place where you're actually doing what you're trying to do. And then from there, progress it. And then eventually you're going to get to where you have to regress it less, and then you're progressing it more until eventually those meet each other, where you don't have to regress it much at all, and you can progress it to a full speed and full swing. So Brian M says, Q, just a big shout out to you and Clay. I joined the last week and content is amazing. The instruction, well, that's even more amazing. Early extension had been a big miss, and I saw your previous office hours on that this morning, did the drills, and it was a eureka moment. Thanks, and looking forward to learning and getting better every day. That's awesome, Brian. Glad to hear that. So I think what he may be talking about is, typically when we have early extension, we talk about this in the Stop Early Extension course, is this angle between, just to kind of go over what Brian's talking about. So, because I know a lot of people are suffering with that early extension out there. So basically we have what's called bending, right, and extending, right? So what early extension is when we do this in the swing too early. And typically that's going to happen in the start of the downswing, right, where we extend too early. So we lose this angle between our lower body and our upper body gets bigger. In the start of the downswing, you need that angle to get smaller, right? So at address, you have a little bit of forward bend, right? Now, when you go up to the top of the swing, you're actually going to extend a little bit. And again, your extend is where you're making the angle bigger. So you're actually going to extend a little bit as you go up to the top. It just doesn't look like it because your shoulders are turning and tilting. But the reality is you are extending. So if you imagine this, if I didn't if I didn't extend at all in my backswing would look like this, right? And that's not right because this is staying in my forward bend. So I actually do this a little bit, and then I turn and tilt my shoulders, right? So that's your backswing. Now, if your head is staying fairly steady, right, and you're turning your shoulders, you're doing that extension automatically, and you probably don't even know it, right? So if you look here, I'm turning, extending, I'm turning and tilting my shoulders. My head's staying fairly steady. I actually did this a little bit with my spine. I extended up a little bit. So in the downswing, what we need to do is we need to bend, right? So what a lot of people are doing is they get here in that slightly extended position because you can overdo this extension at the top. That's what a reverse pivot is, right? So if I extend too much, I'm going to look like this at the top of the swing. I have my spine leaning toward the target. I want to be slightly angled away, nice and steady. If I get my head kind of moving back that way, or my hips move that way, I'm extending too much, right? That's not what I want. So I want to stay here. And then at the start of the downswing, I want to bend more. So this angle between my legs and my spine here, we need it to get smaller. So you can see I've squatted into the ground, right? Even the angle between my lower leg and my upper leg has gotten smaller, right? So it's pretty straight there. And now I've made it smaller. And I've made this angle smaller between my upper body and my lower body. And that's where I need to be. And and if you're someone who does this in the start of the downswing, you're going to need to feel what I would generally try to feel is that you are staying there, right? That you don't ever extend. You're extending way too early. So I would exaggerate the opposite. What's the opposite? Not extending at all, right? Not extending at all in the downswing. So what I would try to feel like is to feel like you don't extend. Like you're going like this, right? You're not extending at all. That's what I would try to feel like. Now, the reality is that you'll probably will extend a little bit, and hopefully it will be later. And if you overdo it, then you can just ease off of it. Now, earlier someone asked about early extension and things like that, but we have to be doing all the other things, right? So I can get my body to move, right? And that's what we talk about in the Stop Early Extension course. But the other things have to match up with it, right? This is why it's such a dang difficult thing to change, because when you move your body in this way, it throws off everything else. So let's say you're someone who early extends, right? And you hit functional golf shots, right? You early extend. Well, if you early extend, you're probably throwing the club in front of your body. Well, if I stay in my posture and I don't really extend and I do that same thing with my upper body, well, look what happens. I'm going to swing way over the top. And I tell you what, that's not going to be a functional golf shot. That's going to be a huge slice, pull, if you're even able to make solid contact when you do that, right? So you've got to shallow out the club. You've got to, if you release the club early, right? If you open up your hips and release the club early, right? You're not getting a functional golf shot either. So you have to match these things up with what the issue is. It's one thing to be able to, okay, I'm not really extending anymore, but why am I hitting the golf ball terrible? It's because something's not matching up, right? Whatever it is that you early extend to compensate for, because that's what early extending is. It's a compensation for a different issue. It's you reacting to something else to be able to hit to be able to hit a functional golf shot. So, for example, the club's coming down steep. Now your early extension is a reaction to that club coming down steep, because if I early extend, well, now look what happens to the club. Now it's coming down on plane, albeit I have to flip now, but now it's coming down on plane. Whereas if I was coming down steep and I didn't early extend, well, I'm just going to swing way over the top, and now I don't have a functional golf shot. So it's your body's way of trying to get the club on plane. So now you have to change the way that you get the club on plane, which is going to have to be shallowing out the club, releasing the club differently, and so on and so forth. So that's why it's a difficult thing to fix, because it's not just getting your body to open up, moving your hips the right way. You have to change a bunch of other things that go along with it as well. So it can be a difficult thing to fix. So I would recommend working on it with the instructor. So that way an instructor can look at, say, hey, we're going to get your body opening up, but I'm going to tell you, hey, this is going to be an issue when we get it to happen. So we have to get this working correct at the same time to be able to hit functional golf shots, because otherwise you're just going to hit big slices. Because that's the big issue that people have. They'll work on stopping the early extension, and then it doesn't automatically lead to perfectly great golf shots. Now, there are times, and this may have happened with Brian, where you may self-organized, meaning you may sense that you're coming way over the top, and you'll self-organize and get that club to work on playing because you have a great awareness of where that is. Maybe Brian's in that situation, but usually I don't see that. Usually I see people, they work on this and it throws things off, and then they kind of give up on it because they're like, well, that didn't work for me, right? Well, it probably did work to fix your early extension, but it just threw something else off, and you got to fix that next. So it's kind of a constant thing, and that's why I recommend working through an instructor with unlimited swing reviews, because you can send a video in. We can say, hey, we're going to get this working a little bit better, and then we're going to progress through that and fix all the little issues that come up along the way. That's why it's such a great program, because it's not just like an in-person lesson where you show up one time, right? And we try to get things working better. Well, you might get them working better that day, but when you leave and you got to work on your own, it's, it can be really difficult. Whereas with the unlimited swing reviews, you go and you work on it. I give you a lesson, tell you what to go out to do, and you go out and work on it, and then you send me more videos, and then we continue to work at it over and over and over. So, but yeah, if you're interested in doing that, I highly recommend the unlimited swing review program. But glad to hear Brian's on the right track here. Sounds like it's going good. All right, so I think we got probably quite a few questions. So I'm going to try. We got about 18 minutes, so I'm going to try and go through these fairly quickly so I can answer everybody's questions. So John W. said, I've been focusing on having the club face parallel with the back of my lead hand, and it has changed everything for me. Even though at setup it looks like my club face is laid open, it is actually square to the ball. If I turn through it properly, my flight and distance has all improved. The lesson was somewhere on the site. Just don't remember where. Thanks. By the way, I've dropped 10 strokes using something. So that's awesome to hear. John, thanks for sharing. I'm not sure what exact video you're referring to. There's probably several videos on that, but yeah, it sounds like you're on our right track. So keep up the great work. So Ryan A says, since following the TSU system and coming more from the inside, I've developed a two-way miss. The more severe is the pull hook that usually is OB. So I try to open my stance a little bit, but end up push slicing. How do you find a tempo to hit a straight or at least know which way you are going to miss? So it sounds like you're probably swinging too much from the inside. So if you're swinging too much from the inside, if your path gets way too far off, you're going to get that two-way miss, right? So if I swing too much from the inside, if I get my face too closed, you're going to get a hook or the pull hook, right? If I get the face too open, I'm going to hit that push or that push slice, right? So you need to get your path to be a little bit more on plane, right? So one thing I would recommend using is you can set up a couple pool noodles. They kind of set up a slot for you to kind of swing down, and you can make sure that club's kind of working down, maybe just slightly from the inside. And because I would imagine if you looked at your swing, you probably got that club way too far inside, and that's what's causing that to happen. So I would try to feel like you're swinging a little less from the inside, and see if that helps get those misses to be a little bit better. Instead of having the two-way miss, you may have a miss, but it's still the dispersion is going to be quite a bit better because you're not so much from the inside. So Rodolfo N says, am I limiting my swing speed for my driver by having a setup that is very close to the impact position? Not necessarily. Now, generally, if you have it close to the impact position, sometimes that can kind of open up your body, right? So if I'm set up like this and I try to get in my impact position, that may open up my body, and that can make it a little bit difficult to turn away from the ball. So it's possible, but it's hard to say. So what I would do is I would just test it, right? Just test and see if see if getting in that impact position is making you set up with the body opened up, right? Because if you set up with the body opened up, it's harder to turn your body away and create space to accelerate the club. The more space and time you have to accelerate the club, that's why we preach the shoulder turn so much in the power turn and the 20-minute distance fixes, because that's one of the easiest ways to get your speed to go up and ultimately your distance. So if you're opened up and your body's kind of opened up like this, you're not going to be able to turn your body away from it as much. You think about it in the opposite respect. If I have my body kind of closed off like this, it can maybe help me get a little bit more speed because now I can turn my body away from the ball just a little bit more. That's not a requirement. That can help you get a little bit more, but it would be just something I would test. Get out your PRGR or swing speed radar or whatever you have. If you don't have one, I'd recommend getting some sort of swing speed device so that way you can see if your speed's going up or down doing it. But that's what I would recommend doing is test it. See if getting in that impact position takes away your speed, and then get one where you can actually maybe turn away a little bit more and see if that adds speed. And if it doesn't, then I just keep doing what you're doing if that helps you hit the ball better. So Michael B says, having trouble with the chip shot just around the green or around the green in the rough, just off the fringe, trying to use a lower lofted club like a 9-iron and using it like a putter. Any tips? I would recommend using a higher lofted club unless it's just like a really perfect lie where the ball's like sitting up on a tee. I wouldn't try to hit like a shot with a lower lofted club. I would try to hit a shot because if you use a lower lofted club, you can't hit it as hard, right? And if you can't hit it as hard, it's going to be a little bit harder to get through the rough. So if you use a higher lofted club, you can hit the ball a little bit higher, and it's also going to help you to get the club more up out of there, right? It's gonna get underneath a little bit more and get up out of there. So that's what I'd recommend doing is, unless the ball is just sitting up on a tee and you can just kind of pick it right off the top of the rough, then I wouldn't recommend using a low lofted club. I recommend using a high lofted club, and I'd maybe put the ball just a little bit back in your stance, which is going to promote more of a downward angle of attack, which is going to help you miss some of the rough that might be in the way and get ball first contact. So high lofted club, ball a little bit further back in the stance. And if it's really deep in there, you can add a little bit of wrist hinge in there as well, which will promote more of a more downward angle attack. I really kind of feel like almost like you're chopping it out of there. Basically kind of take a swing that'd be kind of like that, right? If it's a shorter one, right, it would maybe look something like that. Right, just kind of get it up and out of there. So that'd be something I'd recommend going to practice. So Trent B says, dropped my handicap from 25 to 21.3 over the past 2.5 weeks. Wow. Using TSG, but having issues with bad driver, push, duck, hook. What step in the system would you suggest? Just finished the compression line, was a huge game changer for making good, consistent contact. Trent, I wouldn't necessarily go to a piece in the system. We actually have a specific course that's going to help you with getting rid of hooks. So it's called, I think it's called Never Hook Again. So I would check out that course and go through the drills there. Basically, you're probably swinging too much from the inside. The club's swinging probably too much from the inside. You probably need to get it more on plane a little bit to get that straightened out. And that Never Hook Again course is going to be a great course for you to work through to get that working a little bit better. So to get to that Never Hook Again course, click the house icon at the top. That's going to take you to the homepage. Scroll down the homepage. You'll see a list of all the courses there. Select the Never Hook Again course and get started on the drills. All right, so let's keep going here. So Gregory L says, in the transition of the downswing, I've noticed Clay say to get pressure to the left foot and kept the left shoulder down, so the weight is on the left side. I've also seen a video where he advocates opening up everything, the hips, shoulders, etc., as soon as possible on the downswing. Confused on the moment of the left shoulder. What should it be do in transition? So basically, as we're getting up to the top, our left shoulder is going down, and as we're getting up to the top, we want to get to our lead side, get pressure in the lead side, and then from there, we're going to push into the ground, and that's when everything's going to start opening up. So we're going to push in. We've got that pressure here. Our left shoulder's down. Then we're going to push into the ground. That's going to start straightening out our lead leg. That's going to start pushing my hip up and back. That's going to start pushing my shoulder up and back as I come into impact. Right. So what we don't want to do is get here and then not open up. Right. We want to get that pressure. And what we also don't want to do is we don't want to get up to the top and then just open up. Right. Because, well, one, you're going to have a really hard time opening up if you don't get pressure in the lead side. So that's what I feel like as you're getting that last part of the backswing, you're getting that lead shoulder down and you're getting pressure into that left side and that lead side. And then to start the downswing, you push into the ground, and then you push and rotate everything back out of the way to release that club out in front and get everything opening up. All right, so John D says, after several rounds where my driver is solid, irons are consistently thin, I went to the video. On the video, it appears that I am chasing the ball after impact. Could you advise on places to look on the swing for the cause? So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by chasing the ball. So if you give me a little bit more, let me know. You know, a thin strike is typically going to come from the low spot of your swing, the low point of your swing occurring at or a little bit before the golf ball. So what I would try to feel like is that you're getting that low point more in front of the golf ball. That's what I'd recommend doing. Maybe look at your compression line. So your compression line, I'd try to get it more vertical. If you're too far angled away coming in, that's typically going to make you bottom out too soon. You know, things like that. That's what I'd be looking at. But you want to get that low point. Try to take a deep divot and get that low point to be more in front of the golf ball. And you should get rid of those thin shots. But like I said, it's hard to say. I'm not sure what you mean by chasing the ball. You're going to have to give me a little bit more than that. So Gerald R says, with shorter clubs, is the extent of the backswing the same as for a long iron? It depends on what kind of shot you're trying to hit. If you're just trying, I would say, you know, a typical long iron, you know, stock shot is definitely going to be the same. But if you're trying to hit kind of a, you know, generally when you look at tour players with their shorter irons, they're generally trying to keep them lower. So the swing may not be the same, right? They may take a little bit shorter of a swing and kind of be, it kind of may be like a trying to keep it low kind of swing. So a shorter swing and then really long arms through contact, trying to get as much shaft lean as they can with the shorter irons, trying to drive those in a little bit lower. And then the higher irons, they may stand a little bit taller, take a fuller swing to try to hit it higher. So it really just depends on, you know, what you're trying to do. If you don't have a lot of club head speed, then I would just try to hit them the same way. Try to get your short irons to kind of come in high as well. Because if you don't have a lot of club head speed, then you're not hitting them too high anyway, right? You need that height. So if you have a lot of club head speed, then you can work on trying to kind of drive them in a little bit lower, and it'd be maybe a little bit shorter swing. That's generally what I like to do. Basically, 9 iron and below, maybe 8 iron sometimes. I like to kind of drive them in a little bit lower, and then 7 iron and up, I kind of like to bring in a little bit higher, because if I drive it in too low, then it may skip off the green. I won't stop where I want it to. Now there might be some situations where maybe I have a lot of green to work with, and I can land it in the middle of the green, the pin's in the back, and I can kind of let it release to the back. But you know, that's not always the situation. It really just depends on the kind of shot that you're trying to hit. But a lot of times with the lower, shorter clubs, a lot of times you'll see, you know, better players with more speed will try to drive them in a little bit lower. So Wes B says, if I can't seem to consistently create divots or feel like I'm hitting down on the ball, is it likely have somewhat of an early extension? That may have something to do with it. What I know is happening. Now, the only way to know if you have early extension is to look at it on video. Video your swing, look at it from down the line here. And if you see your hips move toward the golf ball at any point in the golf swing, you have early extension. That's what early extension is. Now, early extension can make it difficult to get a divot, because typically when you have early extension, you're pulling away from the golf ball, you're releasing the club early, which is going to make you your low point of the swing generally be more at or before the golf ball. And that's really what's causing you not to be able to have a divot, is because the low point of your swing is occurring at or before the golf ball. When I say a low point, as I mentioned before, I'm talking about where this club comes down, reaches a low point, and then works back up. If that is occurring, I knew I had a golf ball around here somewhere. If that is occurring at or before the golf ball, you can't really take a divot without chunking it, right? So if you imagine, if my low point of my swing, my club's bottoming out before the golf ball, and I hit the ground, or if my club's bottoming out before the golf ball and I hit the ground, it's going to be a chunk. Whereas if my club is bottoming out way in front of the golf ball and I hit the ground, I can get ball first, hit the ground, and my club can bottom out right here and then come out of the ground. So you need to get the low point more forward in your swing. And that could be early extension. So I look at your swing and see what's going on. It could be an early release. You could have an early release because you don't have any lag. It could be your spine angles are off. It could be that you're coming down steep. So it's just hard to say without seeing your swing. It sounds like you may not have looked at your swing. So I would recommend videoing your swing and seeing what's going on there, and then working on the pieces accordingly. One thing that I may recommend doing is on the website, we have a work along video to help you get that low point more forward. And Clay goes through several things in that video to help you get that low point more forward. It's a half-hour video. It's like a work along. It's like you're practicing with him. Really, really cool video to get that low point of your swing more forward. So if you want to check it out, search the word work along on the website, upper right-hand corner. You'll see a box there. It says work along, or it's a search box. Search 2 words, work along, and it's work along number 2, I believe, ground contact. So you want to work through that. If you're on a mobile device, you can still find the video fairly easily. Click the icon in the upper right-hand corner, and that will expand a menu. Scroll down to the bottom of that menu. You'll find a search box there, and you can search for the work along video. Highly recommend that if you're struggling with divots, chunks, ground contact, anything like that. That's a great video. I refer people to that video all the time. So Saki K says, any tips to stop overswing in the backswing? It depends on why you're overswinging, but generally when I see people overswinging, it's because of spine angle, right? So we're going like this with the spine angle. So keep your spine angle at the top. This is what we talk about in the stable fluid spine course. We want to be slightly angled away at a duress. And then as we go up to the top, we want to stay in that slightly angled away position. Now, when people get to where they're leaning toward the target, it's either because the hips are sliding, right? So they'll go back in the backswing, the hips will slide, right? And then they'll kind of get in this overswing kind of position. Or it'll just be maybe their hips aren't sliding, but they get like a reverse weight shift. They get their upper body kind of going that way. And now I'm overswinging, right? So work through the stable fluid spine course and work on basically staying, not sliding your hips and turning your body away from the target, and keeping your body angled away from the target, and you won't be in an overswing position. As long as you're doing that, I would say you're not overswinging. To me, this is the definition of overswinging. As long as you're keeping your spine angle, you're not really going to be overswinging. If you look at someone like a John Daly, I wish I could overswing like John Daly, if that's what you call overswinging. So you got to be a little bit careful with some of that stuff. But that's what I'd be looking at as your stable fluid spine, making sure that you're nice and angled away. This would be a big no-no. This would be overswinging as long as you're staying nice and turned away. If you're going past parallel or whatever, that's completely fine. That's a total myth that you have to go right at parallel. You can go past it. You can go short of it. Whatever. Everybody's going to be a little bit different in how much they can turn and things like that. But as long as your spine angle is good, then you'll be in good shape with that. So we're pretty much right at 6 o'clock right now. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a good rest of your day, or good rest of your evening. And I'll talk to you all next time.